On the evening of January 27, 1986, the night before the Challenger launch, a teleconference between the Marshall Space Center, a NASA branch in Florida, and Morton Thiokol, the solid rocket booster contractors, took place. The conference was prompted by repeated concerns voiced by Thiokol engineers regarding the effect the freezing temperatures could have on the O-rings. Thiokol engineer Robert Beaujolais presented his argument to the upper management of Thiokol. His premise was, the colder the O-ring, the harder and less responsive it would be. He later told the Presidential Commission on the Space Shuttle Challenger accident, or more commonly referred to as the Rogers Commission,
listeners on the telecon were not pleased with the conclusions and the recommendations.
What was the conclusion?
The conclusions were that we should not fly outside of our database, which was 53 degrees. Those were the conclusions.
Who presented that conclusion?
Mr. Bob Lund.
That evening, he was asked to quantify his concern.
In other words, you honestly believe that you had a duty to prove that it would not work?
That's kind of the mode we got ourselves into that evening. It seems like we've always been in the opposite mode. I should have detected that, but I did not. But the roles kind of switched. So after listening to the verbal presentation in the afternoon, they asked what Thiokol's position was, and I looked around the room, and I was a senior person, and I said, I don't want to fly. Looks to me like the story says that 53 degrees is about it. And of course, we were requested then to go back and do something more. Well, as a result of that telecon, I gave the charts that made the recommendation that we wait until the motor got to 53 degrees.
Normally when you're trying to extrapolate beyond maybe beyond your flight experience, you rely on your qualification testing program. And a system or a subsystem is qualified to fly within a certain regime or a certain envelope that would include environmental effects like temperature. Did you have any sort of qualification range on the temperature of the SRM?
Well, yeah, we had development qual motors that were down in the 40s, as has been pointed out. And so my belief is that those 40-degree motors are probably valid and adequate, but there's the doubt.
Robert Lund, the vice president of engineering at Thiokol and the main conduit between the engineers and management, agreed the Challenger should not be launched in temperatures below 53 degrees. When this recommendation was presented to George Hardy, an associate director for the Marshall Space Flight Center at NASA, he became agitated and stated he was appalled by Lund's recommendation. Lawrence Malloy, Marshall's manager for the SRB project, went further to say, "What do you want me to do, launch next April?" putting direct pressure on the group. The Thiokol engineers remained firm in their position. By 10:30 p.m. that evening, Jerry Mason, a senior vice president at Thiokol, turned to Lund and said, "Bob, take off your engineering hat and put on your management hat."
After Arnie and I had our last say, Mr. Mason said, "We have to make a management decision." He turned to Bob Lund and asked him to take off his engineering hat and put on his management hat. From this point on, management formulated the points to base their decision on. There was never one comment in favor, as I've said, of launching by any engineer or other non-management person in the room before or after the caucus. I was not even asked to participate in giving any input to the final decision charts.
At that point, the shift was to purely a management decision, without considering the engineer's perspective. Lund acquiesces to the illusion of unanimity and agrees with the launch. That was the final shift in framing the decision. Dr. Sally Ride, an astronaut and physicist, was visibly disturbed throughout the commission proceedings.
Did you just say that in the first 160 milliseconds that joint is officially classified as a criticality 1R?
It's not officially, no, ma'am.
That's right. It's just a criticality 1. So even during the first 160 milliseconds, you are not allowed to consider the secondary seal a backup to the primary seal by the critical items list.
Her questions were tough, scientifically precise, and pointed.
I'm not sure I understand your answer to Dr. Wright's question.
Well, let me try again.
Well, it sounds to me like you're trying to exercise some kind of engineering judgment on whether you can consider this a 1R or a 1. And I just don't think that the system allows that. I think that once something is classified as a criticality 1, that sets a red flag in everyone's mind that that's an extremely dangerous situation. And I'm just not sure that you're allowed to go back and rationalize it as, well, during this 100 milliseconds we may have a secondary seal. We may be allowed to consider it a redundant seal. We may have protection to a criticality 1 system.
What we didn't know was not revealed until after her death in 2012. She was the one who discovered the suppressed data regarding the O-rings. Her fellow commission member, General Donald Kutina, revealed that Sally had discreetly slipped him a piece of paper while they were walking together during a session break. It was a NASA document containing the comparison of temperature and O-ring resiliency. She knew she could trust Kutina, who passed the tip on to Dr. Feynman, leading to his famous ice water reveal.
Before the event, from information that was available and understanding that was available, was it fully appreciated everywhere that this seal would become unsatisfactory at some temperature, and was there some sort of a suggestion of a temperature at which the SRB, I guess you call it,
yes,
shouldn't be run?
Yes, sir. There was a suggestion of that. To answer the first question, given the configuration that we ran, that the seal would function at that temperature. That was the final judgment.
Oh, I took this stuff that I got out of your seal and I put it in ice water. And I discovered that when you put some pressure on it for a while and then undo it, it maintains, it doesn't stretch back, it stays the same dimension. In other words, for a few seconds at least, and more seconds than that, there's no resilience in this particular material when it's at a temperature of 32 degrees. I believe that has some significance.
Without her taking the risk she took in sharing the document, NASA and Thiokol may never have conceded to the true circumstances behind the O-ring failure.